Hey everyone, it's Jason. For the longest time, I believed loyalty was a two-way street, especially in a family business. But then, the one person I should have trusted most showed me just how wrong I was. And honestly, what happened after that? Well, it changed not just my life, but the entire legacy my father built. It's a story about betrayal, yeah, but also about finding your own kind of justice. Your sales approach is just too soft, Jason, Kyle said, waving his hand dismissively while Mike from security started gathering my personal items from my desk. It was a crisp Monday morning, the kind where the air still holds a bit of the night's chill. The dealership, Mitchell Motors, wasn't even officially open for the day. My name is Jason Mitchell, 41 years old, and until about 5 minutes ago, I was the senior sales director here. This was my father's dream, a business he poured his heart and soul into, building it from absolutely nothing right here in Sacramento. For 16 solid years, I'd been a part of that dream. I'd helped run this dealership, trained every single salesperson who walked through these doors, knew the names and stories of countless customers. I never missed my sales targets, never caused a ripple of trouble. And now Kyle, my younger brother by 4 years, stood there, behind what used to be our father's mahogany desk. He'd only been the new owner for 3 days, and already, the office was barely recognizable. The old fishing photos Dad cherished? Gone. That worn, comfortable leather chair Dad loved? Replaced with some sleek, modern monstrosity that looked like it belonged on a spaceship. Times are changing, Jason, Kyle stated, his voice devoid of any warmth. Dad's old-fashioned approach just doesn't cut it anymore. We need aggressive numbers, not relationships. I didn't argue. What was the point? My throat felt tight, a knot of disbelief and something that felt a lot like grief forming in my chest. I just watched as Mike, a good man whose daughter I'd helped get her first car just last summer, awkwardly packed up my desk items, a framed photo of my dog, a coffee mug my niece painted, a worn baseball, into a plain cardboard box. He couldn't quite meet my eyes. You'll get 2 months severance, Kyle continued, his gaze fixed on his glowing computer screen, as if I were a minor inconvenience he was just about done dealing with. Professional courtesy, from my own brother. In the business our father built, a business we were supposed to build together. The words felt like a slap in the face. I took the box from Mike, gave him a small, appreciative nod. It wasn't his fault, and walked straight out the gleaming front doors of Mitchell Motors. 16 years of my life, my dedication, my loyalty, all snuffed out in a 15-minute meeting. Out in the parking lot, the morning sun felt strangely harsh. I set the box on the hood of my pickup truck and just stood there for a moment, looking back at the dealership sign, Mitchell Motors, named for our family, but now it felt like it was just his. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, a sliver of curiosity cutting through the numbness. It was a text from Olivia Sterling at Apex Automotive. Meeting still on for 2 p.m. A small, almost involuntary smile touched my lips, the first genuine one all morning. Definitely, I typed back. Just freed up my whole schedule. You see, just 3 days earlier, on Friday, I'd signed a contract with Apex Automotive. They were our biggest supplier, the lifeblood of our inventory. And they'd approached me, Jason Mitchell, directly after years of working closely with them. They said they were impressed by how I'd cultivated our dealership's reputation for integrity and customer loyalty. The paperwork was already being processed, making me their new regional distributor for the entire Western Territory. Kyle didn't know. Nobody back at Mitchell Motors knew. Dad was fishing up in Montana, completely unreachable, enjoying his well-deserved retirement. I pulled out of the dealership lot, taking one last glance through the big plate glass window of the main office. Kyle was already in there, interviewing someone who looked like my replacement. Some young guy in a shiny, ill-fitting suit, gesturing wildly with his hands as he talked. Kyle happened to look up, caught my eye through the glass, and gave a small, almost imperceptible, dismissive wave. I waved back, a polite, almost cheerful smile plastered on my face. Oh man, I wondered how long it would take him to realize what was truly coming. A week, maybe 2 at most. The moment he'd need to order new inventory. That's when he'd learn just how much Too Soft could really cost him. Dad, Marcus Mitchell, started Mitchell Motors 35 years ago. It began as a tiny lot with maybe 10 used cars and a whole mountain of dreams. Mom worked the books in a cramped back office while Dad was out on the asphalt, selling cars 7 days a week, rain or shine. I joined him straight out of college, eager to learn the ropes from the ground up. Kyle, on the other hand, went off to business school, always saying he was going to learn how to make real money. When Kyle finally joined us, about 8 years ago, Dad was over the moon. Both his sons working side by side in the family business. It was his legacy secured, or so he thought. But Kyle and we were cut from different cloths right from the start. I learned the business by getting my hands dirty washing cars, answering phones, understanding the mechanics, listening to customers. Kyle, with his fresh MBA, jumped straight into a management role, armed with theories about optimization, streamlining, and, above all, profit margins. Customers aren't friends, Jason, he'd tell me, shaking his head at my approach. They're transactions, pure and simple. But that wasn't how Dad built this place. That wasn't the Mitchell Motors I knew. We had customers whose parents bought their first cars from Dad, and now their children, even their grandchildren, were coming to us. When people walked onto our lot, I knew their names, their kids' names, what they did for a living, what they were looking for in a vehicle. That personal touch, that relationship, that mattered. Dad never explicitly took sides between us. Different styles for different customers, he'd say, always trying to keep the peace, to smooth over the growing friction. But I saw the slow, creeping tension building. Kyle wanted sweeping changes. Faster turnover, more high-pressure sales tactics, less of the follow-up service that had become our hallmark. He called it old-fashioned baggage. The first real crack in the foundation appeared last Christmas. We were all at Dad's house, the smell of roasted turkey and pine needles filling the air. Dad, looking a bit more tired than usual, mentioned retirement for the very first time. He just turned 65, and his back, after years of leaning into engines and shaking hands, was giving him constant trouble. I've been thinking a lot about the future of the dealership, he said, his voice a little wistful, as he looked between Kyle and me over the dinner table. I remember my heart giving a little leap of anticipation. I expected him to lay out some kind of partnership, a way for Kyle and me to run it together, blending our strengths. Instead, he said, Kyle has some really innovative ideas about modernizing our efficiency. Kyle shot me a quick, triumphant smirk from across the table. I felt something cold and heavy settle in the pit of my stomach. It was a feeling I couldn't quite name then, but it tasted like betrayal. In February, Dad officially signed the ownership transfer papers. Kyle would take over completely in June. The plan, as Dad explained it, was that I'd remain as senior sales director. He trusted Kyle, his own son, to keep me on, to respect my years of experience and my deep connection with our customer base. He trusted him. But I noticed the shifts almost immediately after the ink dried. My sales team, guys I'd personally mentored, were reassigned without my input. My office, the one I'd had for over a decade, was moved to a smaller, windowless space at the back of the building. My access to crucial supplier accounts? Restricted. Just streamlining communications, Jason, Kyle explained with a patently false smile when I asked him about it. making things more efficient. Then, last month, just a few weeks before Kyle's official takeover, representatives from Apex Automotive came to the dealership. Apex was by far our biggest and most important supplier. We moved more of their vehicles, their quality sedans, their rugged trucks, their family-friendly SUVs, than any other dealership in the entire region. They wanted to discuss reorganizing their distribution model, they said. Kyle, conveniently, was tied up with the bank, so I took the meeting alone in the main conference room. And that's when they made their offer. Not to Mitchell Motors, the dealership, but to me, Jason Mitchell, personally. We value relationships, Jason. We always have, Gabriel Rossi, their VP of sales, said, looking me straight in the eye. You embody that. I told them I'd need some time to think about it. It was a monumental decision. A week later, Dad handed Kyle the keys to Mitchell Motors, a symbolic gesture that made my heart ache, and then he flew off to Montana for a long, solitary fishing trip, a chance to decompress and enjoy his newfound freedom. The timing, as it turned out, couldn't have been more perfect or more painful. I met Gabe Rossi again, this time at a quiet, out-off-the-way coffee shop downtown, far from the prying eyes of the dealership. The aroma of dark roast and old books hung in the air. He slid a thick contract across the polished wooden table. Regional exclusive for the Western Territory, he said, his voice low and serious. You'd control the allocation of Apex vehicles to 17 dealerships, including Mitchell Motors. Most of our top-tier models, the ones everyone wants, they'll go through you first. I just stared at the papers, the weight of them, the implications, pressing down on me. The offer was incredible, a game changer. Better money, more reasonable hours, my own small, dedicated team. But it meant leaving the family business, the place I'd poured 16 years of my life into. It meant walking away from everything Dad had built, everything I thought we were building together. Why me, Gabe? I finally asked, my voice barely a whisper. Gabe leaned back in his chair, taking a slow sip of his espresso. Dealerships come and go, Jason, he said, his gaze steady. Owners change, priorities shift. But relationships, genuine, solid relationships, that's what keeps this industry moving forward. You've built more of those with customers, with us, with everyone in our network than anyone else we know. That's the currency we value. That's what we want. I took the papers home with me. I didn't sign them right away. I spent that entire weekend wrestling with it, pacing my small living room, the contract sitting like a heavy weight on my kitchen counter. I thought about Dad, about his dreams for the dealership, for his sons. I thought about Kyle, about the widening gulf between us. I thought about 16 years of my life, the early mornings, the late nights, the satisfaction of handing someone the keys to their new car. Then, on Friday afternoon, just before Dad left for Montana, I overheard something that made my blood run cold. I was walking past Kyle's office, Dad's old office, on my way to give him the monthly sales figures. The door was slightly ajar. He was on a call, his voice confident, almost arrogant. Yeah, we'll clean house once Dad's completely out of the picture, he was saying, followed by a short, harsh laugh. New sales team, new approach. None of that hand-holding crap Jason does. He's fine with schmoozing customers, I guess, but he's completely behind the times, too much like Dad was. Once this transition period is officially done, we'll restructure everything. Streamline it. I stood there, frozen, the sales reports clutched in my hand, the numbers suddenly meaningless. He hadn't seen me. Everything inside me just went quiet, a chilling, silent certainty replacing the turmoil. 16 years. Every day, every weekend, every holiday season, I'd poured my energy into building this place, into honoring what Dad started. And Kyle was just waiting for the opportune moment to shove me out the door, to dismantle everything I and Dad stood for. I didn't make a sound. I just turned and walked away, back to my cramped little office. The decision was no longer a struggle. It was a necessity. I sat down, pulled out the Apex contract, and signed it that very same afternoon. I scanned it and emailed it directly to Gabe Rossi. My subject line was simple: "I'm in." Gabe called me immediately, his voice warm and welcoming. "Jason, glad to hear it. Fantastic news. When can you start?" "Give me a week," I said, my mind already racing. "Just need to tie up a few loose ends at Mitchell Motors." I didn't really need a week. I needed 3 days. Just enough time for the Apex paperwork to be fully processed, for my new distributor credentials to activate in their system. Just enough time to quietly, meticulously back up all my customer files, my contact lists, the notes I'd kept for years, the very relationships Kyle so casually dismissed. I knew with absolute certainty that Kyle would fire me. The only question was when. Monday morning answered that question with brutal efficiency. After leaving Mitchell Motors, that cardboard box of my life sitting on the passenger seat of my truck, I drove straight to my meeting with Apex Automotive. Gabe had an office ready for me. It wasn't fancy, no spaceship chairs or panoramic views, but it was mine. There was a small, dedicated team of 3 people, Sarah, Ben, and Maria, who handled logistics, scheduling, and dealer communications. A large territory map dominated one wall, dotted with pins marking every dealership under my new supervision. Mitchell Motors was, ironically, the largest, most prominent pin on that map. Gabe walked me through their proprietary ordering system, showed me how inventory allocations worked, how to prioritize the flow of vehicles to different dealerships based on their performance, their relationship with Apex, and, of course, current demand. I had complete control. Who got what vehicles when they got them, and, within Apex's margin guidelines, at what wholesale price. "It'll take a few days to get comfortable with it all," Gabe said, clapping me on the shoulder. I nodded, already absorbing the information, my mind clicking through the possibilities. "Take your time," he added. "No rush. Settle in." But there was a clarity in me now, a cold, quiet focus I hadn't felt in a long, long time. The shock and hurt were still there, thrumming beneath the surface, but they were overlaid with a steely resolve. "I'm a quick learner," I replied, my voice even. 1 week passed. I spent every waking hour immersing myself in the Apex systems, familiarizing myself with the needs and histories of all the dealerships in my territory, making introductory calls, setting up my new office just the way I liked it, functional, organized, ready for business. I kept my phone close, always within reach, waiting for the call I knew with absolute certainty was coming. On Thursday afternoon, late in the day, my phone finally rang. The caller ID showed Mitchell Motors, main line. I took a slow breath and answered. "Jason Mitchell speaking." "Jason? It's Chloe from accounting." Her voice was hushed, strained, like she was afraid of being overheard. "Oh man, Jason, he's losing it. We can't get any inventory confirmed. The system, the Apex system, it keeps flagging all our orders for review. We're desperate." I leaned back in my new chair, the leather creaking softly. I could picture the chaos over there. That sounds like a supplier issue, Chloe," I said, keeping my tone neutral, professional. "Well, yeah, that's why I'm calling you," she said, a note of exasperation creeping in. "Kyle's been trying to reach out to Apex all week, but they're giving him the complete runaround. Everyone keeps saying you always handled the Apex account before, so..." "I don't work there anymore, Chloe," I reminded her gently. Silence on the other end. Then a sigh. "I know, Jason, I know. But we've got customers waiting, deposits taken. The showroom floor, it's starting to look half empty. People are getting antsy." I felt a twinge of sympathy. Not for Kyle, not for a second. But for Chloe, for the sales team, for the service guys, good people who depended on those sales, on the dealership running smoothly. Tell Kyle to follow the proper channels with Apex, I said calmly. I'm sure it'll all work itself out eventually. About 2 hours later, my personal cell phone buzzed. Kyle. I let it go straight to voicemail. His message was exactly what I'd expected. Loud, blustering, full of demands, not requests. He claimed I must have messed something up in the ordering system before I left. Said I needed to fix it immediately. The arrogance was astounding. I waited until the next morning, Friday, to call back. Let him stew in it a little longer. Mitchell Motors, this is Kyle. His voice was tight, on edge. Kyle, it's Jason Mitchell, I said, my tone cool and professional. About damn time, Jason, he barked. We need 16 vehicles delivered by Tuesday, absolute latest. The system, your old system, it's blocking everything. What did you do? I kept my voice even measured. Have you spoken with your official Apex Automotive representative regarding your inventory needs? They keep redirecting me, he practically shouted into the phone. Something about a new distributor approval process. I don't have time for this bureaucratic crap, Jason. Just tell me what you did to our account so I can undo it. I didn't do anything to your account, Kyle, I replied truthfully. Then why did all this start happening the moment you walked out that door? He demanded, his voice laced with suspicion. I paused, letting the silence stretch, letting him simmer in his own frustration. I could almost picture him, pacing his, formerly Dad's, office, running his hand through his perfectly styled hair, the way he always did when he was agitated. Maybe, I finally said, drawing the word out, you should ask to speak with the Apex regional distributor for the Western Territory. That's what I've been trying to do, you idiot, he seethed. Nobody at Apex will give me a straight answer about who's handling our territory now. They just keep saying all orders are under review. The satisfaction was a quiet hum beneath my calm exterior. It's me, Kyle, I said, my voice perfectly level. The line went completely quiet. I could hear his breathing, sharp and quick. What are you talking about? He finally stammered, the bluster gone, replaced by a dawning, horrified confusion. I'm Apex Automotive's new Western regional distributor. Kyle, I explained slowly, clearly. All inventory allocations for your entire territory, including Mitchell Motors, now go through my approval. Another long, stunned silence. I could practically hear the gears grinding in his head as the full implication of my words sank in. That's not possible, he whispered. You can't just... Oh, I didn't just anything, Kyle, I interjected, a slight edge creeping into my voice now. Apex Automotive approached me personally last month. They value relationships, Kyle. They always have. Something you might want to remember. I heard him take a ragged breath. So what? You're holding our inventory hostage? Is that it? Because I fired you? That's illegal. I'll call Dad. He'll sort this out. It's not illegal, Kyle. It's business, I said, throwing his own callous words back at him. I'm simply following Apex's standard allocation procedures. And as for Dad, well, he's fishing in Montana, remember? Unreachable. Your choice to make changes while he was away, if I recall. My voice was calm but firm. This isn't because you fired me, though I admit the timing has a certain poetry to it. No, this is because I'm doing my new job, Kyle. And my job is to ensure fair and equitable distribution of Apex vehicles across the entire Western Territory. Your dealership, Mitchell Motors, will get its allocation based on the same stringent criteria as every other dealership under my purview. No special treatment. What's that supposed to mean? He demanded, his voice rising again, laced with a new note of desperation. It means, I said, pausing for effect, that your first big inventory order as the new sole owner of Mitchell Motors just got flagged for a comprehensive review. It's standard procedure, Kyle, for any dealership undergoing a significant change in ownership or management. I'll need to thoroughly assess your dealership's current status, its financial stability, its adherence to Apex partnership guidelines, before approving any large-scale vehicle shipments. How long will that take? The tension in his voice was palpable. He was realizing slowly that the tables had completely turned. I made a show of glancing at my calendar, a purely theatrical gesture for my own benefit. Let's see. For most new owners or those undergoing significant restructuring, it can take a little while. 2 weeks, maybe 3 if everything is in perfect order. 3 weeks? He shrieked. We'll have an empty lot by then. We'll be ruined. That's the process, Kyle, I said, my voice a calm counterpoint to his rising panic. He suddenly lowered his voice, shifting tactics, trying for a tone of conciliation, of shared history. Look, Jason, brother, I know you're upset about what happened, but this is family. Dad built this place for both of us. You know that. I remember, Kyle, I said, my voice still even, but the memory of his betrayal, his casual dismissal of me, of Dad's values, burned fresh. But like you said just a few days ago, times are changing. Your sales approach, as you so clearly pointed out, was deemed too aggressive by your own standards, not relationship-focused enough for the modern market, apparently. I could almost hear him spluttering on the other end. You son of a... he began, but I cut him off. I'll review your dealership's application personally, Kyle. Don't worry, I said, my voice dripping with false reassurance. Have a good day now. And with that, I hung up. I stared out the window of my new office, not at any grand vista, just the unremarkable cityscape of downtown Sacramento. I didn't feel the surge of triumphant satisfaction I'd half expected. Instead, there was just a hollow, aching sense of something precious, something foundational, having been irrevocably broken. Something that could never truly be fixed. My phone immediately rang again. Kyle. I declined the call. It rang once more, almost instantly. This time, the caller ID displayed, Dad, Marcus Mitchell. My stomach clenched. This was about to get a lot more complicated. I took a deep breath and answered, Jason? It's Dad. What in the Sam Hill is going on down there? Kyle just called me, said you're blocking all his inventory, trying to bankrupt him. I closed my eyes, pressing the cool glass of my phone to my ear. I hadn't expected Kyle to be able to reach him so quickly up in the wilds of Montana. So much for being unreachable. I'm not blocking anything, Dad, I said, trying to keep the weariness out of my voice. I'm working for Apex Automotive now. I'm their new Western regional distributor. Kyle fired me last week. A long, heavy pause stretched across the line. I could hear the crackle of a distant campfire, or maybe just static. He what? Dad finally said, his voice rough with disbelief. First day as the new owner, Dad. Said my sales approach was too soft, that I wasn't aggressive enough. Had security walk me out like a common criminal. The words came out flatter than I intended, devoid of the emotion churning inside me. Dad's breathing changed, became heavier. He told me you quit, Jason. He said you got a much better offer from a competitor and just walked away. Left him in the lurch. The betrayal, sharp and unexpected, stung all over again. Even now, even to Dad, Kyle was lying, twisting the truth to fit his narrative. Dad, I have the termination paperwork right here. 2 month severance. Professional courtesy, he called it. My voice was tight. Dad went quiet again. I could picture him so clearly, sitting on the worn wooden porch of his fishing cabin, the vast Montana sky above him, trying to make sense of how his 2 sons, his legacy, had come to this. Trying to reconcile the son he thought he knew with the one Kyle was painting. "And now you're with Apex?" he asked, his voice filled with a confusion that pained me. "Yes, Dad. I'm their Western Regional Distributor now. It means all dealership allocations for this territory, including ours, well, Mitchell Motors, they go through me." Dad let out a long, slow sigh, the sound heavy with disappointment. "So you're getting back at him, then? Is that it, Jason? Tit for tat?" "I'm doing my job, Dad," I said, the same words I'd used with Kyle, but they felt different now, tinged with the hurt of Dad's assumption. His dealership's order was flagged for review. It's standard procedure for new ownership transferring to a sole proprietor. "Standard procedure, Jason?" Dad's voice carried that familiar weight, the one that always made me feel about 10 years old, the one that signaled his deep disappointment. "This is the business I built for both of you, for the family." "I know that, Dad. Believe me, I know," I said, my own voice cracking slightly. "I gave it 16 years of my life. And now what? You two are just going to tear it apart piece by piece because you can't see eye to eye?" I stood up, walked to the window of my office, needing the distance, the movement. "I didn't start this, Dad," I said, my voice low. "But you're determined to finish it, aren't you?" He shot back. "I'm just—" I stopped, forcing down the bitter cocktail of anger and hurt that threatened to spill out. "I'm just trying to move forward, Dad. By choking your brother's inventory until he gasps for air? I never said I wouldn't approve his order eventually," I said, trying to keep my voice reasonable. "But you will delay it. You'll make him sweat." "That wasn't a question, Jason." His tone was resigned. I didn't answer. There was nothing I could say to that, not without revealing more than I was ready to. "I'm coming home," Dad said finally, his voice firm. This mess needs to be fixed, face to face." "There's nothing to fix, Dad," I said, weariness seeping into my bones. "I have a new job, a good job. Kyle has what he always wanted, complete control of Mitchell Motors. Clearly not complete control if he can't get any cars," Dad muttered, a note of dark irony in his voice. "I'll be there tomorrow afternoon. Don't you do anything drastic until we talk, Jason. You hear me?" He hung up before I could reply. I set my phone down on the desk and leaned against the cool window pane, watching the indifferent flow of traffic on the street below. Dad would be disappointed, I knew that, but he didn't know everything. He didn't know the depth of Kyle's scheming. He didn't know that Kyle had planned to oust me all along, that his vision for Mitchell Motors was a betrayal of everything Dad had built. A soft knock on my office door made me turn. It was Gabe Rossi, his expression concerned. "Everything okay, Jason? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Family stuff, Gabe," I said, managing a weak smile. "The usual drama." He nodded, his eyes knowing. I heard Kyle Mitchell's been rather vocal with our main office support staff, demanding expedited service, making some pretty wild accusations. He would be. That was Kyle's style. Gabe closed the door softly behind him. "Jason," he began, his voice serious, "when we brought you on board, we knew this transition might be awkward, given the circumstances. But we also believe that loyalty, true loyalty, goes both ways. And there's something I think you should know, something I didn't tell you before." I turned to face him fully, a knot of apprehension tightening in my chest. "Your brother, Kyle," Gabe continued, his gaze steady, He actually approached Apex Automotive about 3 months ago, long before your father officially retired. He wanted to discuss changing suppliers entirely once he took over Mitchell Motors. My stomach dropped. I felt the blood drain from my face. He what? Said our prices were too high, Gabe elaborated, his voice neutral but firm. Said our delivery schedules were too slow, too inflexible for his new vision. He was shopping around pretty aggressively with other manufacturers. In fact, he told us in no uncertain terms that if Apex couldn't beat competitor pricing by at least 15% across the board, he'd switch the entire dealership inventory over to Bolt Drive Motors. Bolt Drive. My mind reeled. Bolt Drive Motors was Apex's biggest, and frankly, sleaziest competitor. They were notorious for their cheaper, lower-quality vehicles, their flimsy warranties, and their absolutely abysmal after-sales service. It was everything Dad had meticulously avoided, everything Mitchell Motors had built its reputation against. He wouldn't, I said, the words coming out automatically a reflexive defense, but even as I uttered them, a cold certainty settled in. Oh yes, he absolutely would. It fit perfectly with everything else, the arrogance, the obsession with short-term profits, the complete disregard for legacy or relationships. Gabe just shrugged, a small, almost imperceptible movement. We've seen it before, Jason. New owners come in, eager to make their mark, slash costs wherever they can, often without understanding the long-term consequences. They see the shiny immediate numbers, not the slow erosion of trust and reputation. Dad would never have approved that switch, I said, my voice hollow. Mitchell Motors has been an exclusive Apex partner since the very beginning. It was built on that quality, that trust. Well, your father wasn't going to be in charge anymore, was he? Gabe said gently. That's precisely why we approached you, Jason. We value the strong, ethical relationship your father built with Apex over decades. We wanted to keep that relationship within the Mitchell family, if possible. We just wanted to make sure it was with the right side of the family. I sank down into my chair slowly, the room seeming to tilt slightly. I was processing this new, devastating layer of betrayal. Kyle hadn't just betrayed me, his brother. He'd been actively planning to dismantle the very essence of what Dad valued about the business. The commitment to quality, the hard-won reputation, the loyal partnerships built over 40 painstaking years. He was going to burn it all down for a quick buck. I didn't know, I said finally, the words barely a whisper. The depth of his deceit was staggering. Well, now you do, Gabe said, a hint of grim satisfaction in his tone. He headed for the door, then paused, his hand on the knob. For what it's worth, Jason, he added, turning back to look at me. Your brother's application for inventory allocation is still sitting on your desk, under review. How long that review process takes? Well, that's entirely up to you now. He left, closing the door quietly behind him. I stared at my computer screen, at Kyle's pending order request blinking innocently. My finger hovered over the keyboard. Dad would be here tomorrow, landing in Sacramento, expecting a resolution, expecting me to somehow fix this, to be the bigger person. But now I understood what was truly at stake. This wasn't just about me being fired anymore. This was about saving my father's legacy from his own son. That night, sleep was impossible. My mind raced, replaying every conversation, every slight, every warning sign I'd missed or dismissed over the years. I kept seeing Dad's face, imagining his reaction when he'd finally discover the full, unvarnished truth. Not just about the bitter rift between me and Kyle, but about Kyle's cold-blooded plan to gut the business, to sell off its soul for parts. At 5 a.m., the first hint of gray light seeping through my blinds, I gave up on the idea of sleep. The anxiety was a living thing in my chest. I got dressed, drove to the silent, empty Apex office and started making calls. Dealerships on the East Coast were already open, their days well underway. I pulled up allocation records, cross-referenced order histories, dug into the detailed relationship notes Gabe's team had meticulously maintained. By 7 a.m., as the sun finally broke over the horizon, I had what I needed. A complete panoramic picture of Apex's Western Territory operations, and, more importantly, exactly where Mitchell Motors, under its current, reckless management, truly fit into that picture. Or rather, how it didn't fit. Dad texted around 8:30. His flight was on time, scheduled to land at 11. I told him to meet me at noon, not at the dealership, not at my new office, but at the Rusty Mug Diner, a noisy, bustling, neutral territory, smelling of old coffee and frying bacon. At 9 a.m., I called Chloe, the accountant back at Mitchell Motors. Her voice was frayed. "Jason, thank God you called. Kyle's been an absolute nightmare. The showroom's practically a ghost town. He's blaming everyone but himself." "Chloe, I need something from you," I said, keeping my voice calm and direct. "I need the last 3 years of detailed sales records and, crucially, all the customer satisfaction surveys from that period. Can you discreetly email them to my personal account?" She hesitated. I could hear the fear in her silence. "Jason, Kyle's locked down all the financial data, all the customer feedback. Says it's proprietary information now, and he's the only one with access." "Chloe," I said, my voice softening but firm, "you've been there for 12 years. You knew Dad when he was building this place from the ground up. You know what Mitchell Motors is supposed to stand for. I'm trying to preserve that, Chloe. The Real Mitchell Motors." A long pause. I could hear her take a shaky breath. "Okay, Jason, give me an hour. I think I know a back way into the old server archives." By 10 o'clock, the spreadsheets and scanned survey documents were sitting in my inbox, and they showed exactly what I'd suspected, what I'd known deep down all along. Our highest customer satisfaction scores, our most loyal repeat business, our most profitable long-term relationships, they all came from customers who purchased Apex vehicles, the very models that would be unceremoniously dropped and replaced under Kyle's ill-conceived bolt drive supplier plan. The numbers didn't lie. Kyle wasn't just being ruthless. He was being stupid. At 11:30, I printed everything: the damning emails, the sales figures, the customer surveys, Gabe's notes on Kyle's bolt drive negotiations, and drove over to the Rusty Mug. Dad was already there, sitting in a worn vinyl booth near the back, looking tired, older, and more worried than I'd seen him in years. The usual hearty aroma of the diner felt heavy, oppressive. We ordered coffee, but neither of us touched it when it arrived, the steam rising unnoticed between us. "Your brother tells a very different story, Jason," Dad began, his voice low, his eyes searching mine for something, anything, that made sense of this mess. "I figured he would, Dad," I said, my own voice equally quiet. I slid the neatly folded termination paperwork across the slightly sticky Formica tabletop. Dad picked it up, his brow furrowed, and read it slowly, his expression darkening with each line. The official letterhead, the cold corporate language, my signature acknowledging receipt. This doesn't sound like Kyle," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Dismissed without cause? Effective immediately? Doesn't it, Dad?" I asked softly. I then pushed over the printouts of Chloe's emails, the ones detailing Kyle's inquiries and preliminary quotes from Bolt Drive Motors. Dad scanned them, his confusion deepening. "What am I looking at here, Jason? Bolt Drive? I've never even heard of them in a positive light." "That's Kyle's grand plan to modernize Mitchell Motors, Dad," I explained, keeping my voice steady. Switch suppliers from Apex, our partner for over 30 years, to Bolt Drive. Cut vehicle costs, boost short-term profit margins, make the quarterly reports look spectacular. Dad's hands, calloused from years of honest work, tightened around the papers, crinkling the edges. He looked closer at the date stamps on the emails. These are dated before I officially signed over the ownership to him. He was planning this for months, behind my back, behind your back. His voice was a low rumble of dawning comprehension and deep hurt. Yes, Dad, I confirmed. Fire me, knowing I'd never go along with it. Switch suppliers to a cheaper, inferior brand. Restructure everything to focus on volume over value, transactions over trust. Everything you spent your entire career building a reputation against. Dad set the papers down on the table with a thud, the coffee cups rattling in their saucers. He rubbed his eyes, a gesture of profound weariness. I don't understand, Jason. Why would he do this to the business? To our name? Quarterly profits, Dad, I said, the cynicism tasting bitter on my tongue. Fast numbers, impressive growth on paper, at least for a year or two. Enough time to build his reputation as some kind of brilliant turnaround artist. And then, I paused, letting the final piece fall into place. Then my guess is he sells Mitchell Motors to one of those big, impersonal auto group conglomerates, cashes out, and moves on to his next conquest, leaving behind a hollowed-out shell. Dad just stared at me, his face pale. Sell Mitchell Motors? Our legacy? I nodded slowly. Look at the last page of that file, Dad. It showed a series of discrete email inquiries Kyle had made, requesting preliminary business valuation assessments from 3 major national auto group conglomerates. He hadn't just been planning to change suppliers. He'd been prepping the business for a quick flip. Dad fell silent, the boisterous sounds of the diner fading into a dull roar around us. He just sat there, absorbing the devastating weight of his younger son's betrayal, not just of me, but of him, of everything he held dear. Finally, he looked up, his eyes old and shadowed. And now you're at Apex, in a position of power over him. They came to me, Dad, I reiterated gently. They knew what Kyle was planning. They wanted to protect their own interests, yes, but they also valued the relationship you built with them. So what now, Jason? He asked, his voice heavy with a new kind of pain. You punish him? You punish your own brother by strangling the business I poured my life into building? Is that your plan? That stung deeply, but I was ready for it. I'd anticipated this. I reached into my briefcase again and pulled out another folder. This one thicker, more detailed. My real plan. I'm not punishing anyone, Dad, I said, meeting his gaze directly. I'm trying to save what you built. What we built. I opened the folder, spreading out the proposal I'd stayed up half the night refining, the other half spent just staring at the ceiling. Mitchell Motors becomes a premium, flagship Apex dealership. I explained, my voice gaining strength, conviction. We focus on exclusive Apex models, the top-tier lines. We get priority inventory allocation. We develop specialized, high-value service packages. We double down on everything Kyle fought against, everything he dismissed as old-fashioned. But here's the kicker, Dad, with significantly higher profit margins per unit and demonstrably better customer loyalty and retention. Dad leaned forward, picking up the proposal, his eyes, still sharp despite his weariness, scanning the numbers, the projections, the detailed 5-year plan. These projections, are these real, Jason? Or just wishful thinking? They're real, Dad, I said firmly. I've been tracking this data for years, quietly, Our highest profit customers, the ones who send us referrals, the ones who come back vehicle after vehicle, generation after generation. They're the ones who value the Apex quality, the personal relationship, the trust. Not the ones who were just chasing the lowest price tag of the week. Dad looked up from the papers, a flicker of something. Hope, respect, in his eyes. Kyle won't accept this. He'll never agree to run the business this way. It goes against everything he believes. No, I agreed, nodding slowly. He won't. Not willingly. Dad leaned back, a frown creasing his brow again. Then what's the point of all this, Jason? If he's the owner. The point, Dad, I said, playing my final card, is that you still own the property, the building, the land it sits on. Kyle only owns the business entity, the dealership license. He's a tenant. Understanding, slow and then sudden, dawned in Dad's eyes. A complex mix of emotions played across his face. Shock, reluctance, and then a dawning, steely resolve that mirrored my own. You want me to evict my own son from his business? I want you to give him a choice, Dad, I said, my voice firm but not unkind. A clear choice. He can either agree to run Mitchell Motors the right way, our way, the way that honors your legacy and ensures its future under a new, very specific lease agreement. Or he can sell his controlling share of the business, his dealer license, back to us. At fair market value, of course. Us, Dad repeated, his gaze locking with mine. You and me. I held his gaze unwavering. Partners, Dad, like it should have been. Dad leaned back in the booth, observing me, really seeing me, perhaps for the first time in a long while, not as just his older, softer son, but as a man with a plan, with strength he hadn't recognized. And if I don't agree to this, Jason, if I can't bring myself to do this to Kyle, then, I said, my voice heavy with the weight of that possibility, then I'll approve Kyle's current inventory order this afternoon. I'll step back completely. I'll let him run Mitchell Motors into the ground his way, with Bolt Drive or whoever else he chooses. It'll be your choice, Dad. Your legacy. Dad shook his head slowly, a wry, almost pained smile touching his lips. Your brother, he really did underestimate you, Jason. We both did. I didn't reply. I just waited, the silence stretching between us, thick with unspoken emotions, with years of history. Finally, Dad reached for his cell phone, his hand surprisingly steady. I need to make a call, he said, his voice raspy. To Eleanor, my attorney. He didn't look at me, just dialed the number from memory. Then he waited, his gaze distant. Eleanor, hi. It's Marcus Mitchell. Yes, I'm back in town. Listen, I need you to pull the property lease agreement for the dealership on Grand Avenue. Yes, today if possible. He paused, then looked directly at me. A new hardness in his eyes, a resolve I hadn't seen since Mom passed. I think it's time, he said into the phone, his voice now firm and clear, to renegotiate some rather critical terms with the current tenant. 2 days later, the air in the main conference room at Mitchell Motors, a room I knew so well, was thick with unspoken tension. Kyle, Dad, and I sat on one side of the long, polished table. Eleanor, Dad's longtime, no-nonsense attorney, sat opposite us, her expression impassive. None of us spoke as she methodically laid out 3 bound documents on the gleaming surface. The silence was heavy, broken only by the distant hum of the air conditioning. Option 1, Eleanor said, her voice crisp and professional, as she slid the first document across the table toward Kyle. You continue as the sole owner and operator of Mitchell Motors, but under a new, significantly revised lease agreement with your father, the property owner. This new lease includes specific, non-negotiable operational covenants, primary among them maintaining Apex Automotive as your exclusive vehicle supplier and adhering to their premium brand standards. Kyle's jaw tightened, a muscle pulsing angrily in his cheek. He didn't even touch the paper. His eyes darted from me to Dad, then back to Eleanor, alight with dawning fury. Option 2, Eleanor continued, unfazed, pushing the second document forward. You sell your complete ownership stake in the Mitchell Motors business entity, including the dealer license, back to your father and your brother, Jason. The sale price will be determined by an independent third-party valuation at fair market value, naturally minus any demonstrable recent losses incurred due to the current inventory disruption and operational mismanagement. Kyle glared at me, his face contorted with rage. This is extortion. You set me up. This is business, Kyle, I replied, my voice calm, echoing his own dismissive words from that awful Monday morning. Just business. Option 3, Eleanor interjected smoothly. Before Kyle could explode further, she pushed the third and final document across the table. You maintain your full ownership of the Mitchell Motors business entity. However, your father, Robert Mitchell, as the property owner, will terminate your current lease agreement for these premises, effective in 30 days. You would, of course, be free to relocate your business to another suitable location, should you choose to do so. Kyle stared at Dad, his expression a mixture of disbelief and betrayal. You'd really do this to me, Dad? Your own son? After everything? Dad met his gaze, his own eyes filled with a deep, weary sadness, but also an unshakable resolve I hadn't seen in him for years. You fired your brother, Kyle, the day I left for Montana, without so much as a phone call to me. You lied to me about why he left. You secretly planned to dismantle everything I spent 40 years of my life building, to tarnish the family name with inferior products and shady practices. So yes, Kyle. Dad's voice was quiet but firm, each word landing like a hammer blow. I really would. Kyle stood abruptly, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. He paced the length of the conference room, from the window overlooking the half-empty sales lot to the far wall and back, his fists clenched. This is insane. This is completely insane. All because I wanted to modernize the dealership, make us more competitive, increase profits. All because you forgot what makes us special. Kyle, Dad said, his voice still quiet, but carrying the weight of generations. All because you forgot about people, about trust, about integrity. The room fell into a profound silence, broken only by Kyle's ragged breathing. He stared out the window at the rows of empty parking spaces, a stark testament to his modern approach. Finally, his shoulders slumped slightly. He turned back, his face pale, his eyes defeated. How much? He asked, his voice barely a whisper, all the fight gone out of him. Fair market value, Kyle, I said, keeping my voice neutral. As per the agreement. You'll walk away with enough to start fresh. Somewhere else, build something your own way. Kyle let out a short, bitter laugh, devoid of any humor. You planned this all along, didn't you, Jason? From the moment I fired you. No, Kyle, I replied honestly. I didn't plan it. I just saw a necessary way forward when you forced my hand, when you showed me what you truly intended to do to Dad's legacy, to our family's name. He looked from Dad to me, then down at the second document, the buyout agreement, still lying on the table. Without another word, he walked back to his chair, picked up the pen Eleanor offered, and signed his name on the indicated line. There was no more drama, no shouting, no last-ditch arguments. Just the quiet, decisive scratch of pen on paper, a sound that signified the ending of one painful chapter and the tentative, hopeful beginning of another. When he finished, he pushed the document back across the table, stood up, and walked out of the conference room, out of the dealership, and out of our lives without a single glance back. 6 months later, I stood in the newly renovated showroom of Mitchell Motors, now officially and proudly, Mitchell & Son Automotive. The scent of fresh paint and new car leather mingled pleasantly in the air. The polished floor gleamed under the bright lights, reflecting the full array of gleaming Apex vehicles. The showroom wasn't just full of inventory again. It was bustling with customers, with families looking for their next reliable ride, with young professionals eyeing sleek new sedans. Weekend foot traffic was steady, often spilling out onto the lot. Our service department, now fully staffed with experienced Apex-certified technicians, was booked solid 3 weeks out. Dad worked part-time now, mostly by choice. He'd come in during the busy periods, greeting old customers by name, telling his familiar stories, his eyes twinkling with a contentment I hadn't seen in him for years. The heavy weight of disappointment, of his son's bitter feud, had finally lifted from his shoulders. He seemed lighter, happier, more himself. We hadn't heard a word from Kyle. The last I knew, through the grapevine, he'd moved down to Phoenix, taken a sales management position with one of those massive, impersonal dealer groups. I hoped, genuinely, that he'd find whatever it was he was looking for. Gabe Rossi from Apex stopped by one afternoon, unannounced, taking a slow walk around the refreshed showroom, a satisfied smile on his face. "Looks good, Jason. Really good," he said, clapping me on the back. "Heard your numbers are back up. Way up. Better than before, Gabe," I said, a quiet pride in my voice. "The premium Apex models, the ones Kyle thought were too expensive for our market, they're moving faster than we can get them in stock." Gabe nodded, his smile widening. "Relationships, Jason, like I always said. Like my dad always said." I corrected him gently, and he chuckled. After Gabe left, I walked out onto the main lot. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows. Dad was there, patiently showing a young couple, clearly first-time parents, the safety features of a mid-sized Apex SUV. I watched as he handed them his personal business card, telling them to call him directly, anytime, even on his personal line, if they had any questions or concerns. Some things, the truly important things, never changed, and they shouldn't. Later that evening, as we were closing up, Dad lingered in the showroom, his gaze fixed on the new illuminated sign above the main entrance. Mitchell & Son Automotive. His expression was thoughtful, a little wistful. "You know, Jason," he said, his voice soft, "I always dreamed it would be Mitchell & Sons someday, plural." I didn't reply, just stood beside him, following his gaze. "I was wrong about Kyle," he continued, his voice laced with a familiar sadness, but also a newfound acceptance. "So wrong. But I was wrong about you too, Jason." "How's that, Dad?" I asked, turning to look at him. He met my eyes, a faint, almost apologetic smile on his lips. "I always thought your way, your soft approach, as Kyle called it, I worried it wasn't tough enough for this business. Turns out," he paused, his voice filled with a quiet pride that warmed me to my core, "it was the strong one all along. The enduring one." We locked up the dealership together and walked out into the cool evening air, towards our respective cars. As Dad reached his truck, he paused, his hand on the door handle. "You could have destroyed him, you know," he said, his voice low, serious. "You had the power to cut off his inventory completely, ruin him financially. No one would have blamed you, not really, after what he did." I just shook my head. "It wouldn't have been right, Dad. That's not who we are." Dad nodded slowly, a deep understanding in his eyes. "No," he said, "it's not. And that, Jason, that's why you're standing here tonight, and he's not. I watched him drive away, his taillights disappearing down the quiet street. Then I turned back and looked at the dealership, our dealership. It wasn't built on revenge or bitterness, or even a sense of vindication. It was standing on the same solid foundation it always had, a commitment to doing right by people, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And in that moment, standing there alone, I felt a quiet sense of peace, of a difficult journey navigated, and a legacy, not just preserved, but perhaps made even stronger. This journey, it taught me so much about trust, about family, and about the quiet strength found in sticking to your principles, even when the world tries to knock you down. It showed me that true success isn't just about the bottom line. It's about the relationships you build and the integrity you maintain. What do you all think? Have you ever faced a betrayal that forced you to find an unexpected path to your own kind of justice? I'd love to hear your stories and your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences, your resilience, they're all part of this shared human journey. And hey, if this story resonated with you, if you found some inspiration or connection here, please consider subscribing to the channel for more real-life stories like this one. And if you're able, a super thanks is always deeply appreciated. It helps us continue to share these important narratives and supports the healing that comes from telling and hearing them. Thanks for listening.